The gamification course is over. It's been real. It's been virtual. It's been fun, at least for me, and I hope for you it's been real fun. In this last wrap-up video, I'll give some statistics on participation in the course and offer a few closing thoughts based on my experiences. A word of warning, this video is longer than most of the other ones in the course because it's here for anyone who is particularly interested in getting this additional information. It's about 25 minutes long. First, to reiterate what I sent out in an announcement, the certificates of accomplishment for people who completed the assignments in the course have been released. They were supposed to go out by email, but if you didn't receive them for some reason or need more information, you can go to this URL on the Coursera website. That should have all the information. I should note that the distribution process and the details of the certificates themselves are set by either Coursera or my university, so I don't have any control over them. And I should emphasize that the point of the course is learning. And while I understand that there are many valuable aspects of getting the certificate, either for motivation in the course itself or as some documentation to use elsewhere, keep in mind what I talked about in discussing the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and rewards. Okay, so what did I take away from this course? The starting point is that there actually are two different kinds of MOOCs. A MOOC is a massive or massively open online course, and the two categories break down in that way. The first kind of MOOC is what you might call a massively open course. And these are also sometimes called CMOOCs or connectivist MOOCs, done by people like George Siemens and Stephen Downes and Dave Cormier and Dave Wiley. These were actually some of the first MOOCs to be developed, and they focus on radically decentralizing the educational experience, engaging learners through participation, not having one central speaker, but having the faculty member essentially orchestrate a polyphonic conversation among a large number of people. On the other side are what you could call the MOOCs, where MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course, and these are sometimes called XMOOCs. And this is where Coursera generally fits in. These are open courses focused on massive scale, but the structure is still more similar to a traditional in-person course. Me, the faculty member, talking to you, communicating the content to a group of students in a more traditional lecture format. The XMOOC Coursera type platform tends to be great for getting the biggest scale, but doesn't allow the degree of interactivity traditionally that the CMOOC style allows for. So with that introduction, I'll say what I was pleasantly surprised about in this course was the degree of interactivity and involvement by the students, even in what you'd call an XMOOC format. In many ways, this class was massively open. First of all, it was massively open in terms of who participated, not just the numbers of students, but I put here students in quotes because when I did a survey at the beginning of the class, about 80% of you reported that you're not a full-time student, that primarily what you do when you're not sitting here watching my gamification videos is work for a living. And so most of you are students in the sense that you're interested in learning. You're committing your time to this course, which is wonderful because lifelong learning is something essential in today's world, but you're doing it outside of the realm of someone who would be considered a student in the traditional context. So that's one sense that this course was open. It brought in lots and lots of people who want to learn, but who are not in a traditional student mode. And that, as I said, is something that is increasingly important, and it's good to see. The other aspect that was massively open was the degree to which so many of you participated and engaged in this course, despite the fact that the course was structured around me sitting here talking to you in these pre-recorded videos. So within the course, there were close to 20,000 posts on the discussion boards, and a great many of them involved peer learning, involved students asking questions and other students answering them. And that's something that I was incredibly excited to see, because while I and my TA tried to participate participate in the forums and respond via announcements and Twitter and so forth to the extent possible, we knew that we couldn't possibly address all of the questions that were going to come up, and we had to depend on other students to be part of not just the learning, but also part of the teaching. And that was great to see. We also saw through the peer assessment process 187,000 times students evaluated other students' work. And more than 13,000 of you completed at least one peer assessment. Now, as I said at the outset, I know there are limitations to the peer assessment process. Not all the peer assessments were great. There are students who either didn't understand the assignment, there were all kinds of language issues, and other reasons why having students assess other students is not perfect, but it's the only possible way to give real human assessments at this incredibly massive scale. And I felt it was critical not just to have machine-graded, multiple-choice type assessments in this course, given the nature of the material. And so the fact that so many of you participated not just as someone being a learner, but as someone reviewing other people's work, that was something that was exciting and good to see. And I was excited by the number of positive comments I saw in the forums from people saying, yeah, this peer assessment really worked, really gave me some great feedback. So those were examples in the course. The wiki was another one where we got hundreds of posts about gamification voluntarily contributed by students. There also was lots and lots of participation outside the course. Students around the world forming meetups or discussion groups around the course. 3,500 people voluntarily forming a Facebook group. I didn't form the Facebook group, a group of students did. And it became an active point of discussion around the course, totally outside of the Coursera platform. 2,700 tweets on Twitter using the hashtag based on the data that I have. Over 250 people submitted photos on the hashtag Gamification12Pics, showing what their setup was like when they were participating in the course. All student-generated content. Now, was that as much as it conceivably could be? Was that, no. Was it a small fraction of the 81,000 students who signed up for the class? Maybe. But it was exciting and important to see that despite the limitations of the platform and despite all the technical issues that we went through, so many of you took on the opportunity to actively be part of your learning. That's something that's critical in this kind of open online format, and frankly, it's critical in a traditional classroom environment as well in the world today, and all that was good to see. Okay, so let's look at some specific statistics. Big picture, 81,600 or so students signed up for the course. 8,280 students at the end of the process received the certificate of completion for scoring above 70% on the assessments. So what are we to make of this? Well, you get roughly 11% of the students who started the class got their certificate. So some might say the dropout rate was close to 90%. That's misleading. Certainly, only a minority of the students who signed up for the class got their certificate. First of all, that's higher than virtually any of the comparable classes that sites like Coursera have offered. So on a relative basis, this engagement level was quite substantial. 8,200 people is an awful lot of people to complete successfully any kind of course that's being offered. And the number understates the percentage of students who engaged and participated all the way through. There are lots of reasons why a student might watch the videos, be involved in the class, and not complete all of the assignments. Maybe they had a technical glitch. Maybe they decided they didn't have the time to do all of the homeworks and written assignments, even though they participated all the way through. Maybe they just didn't feel that getting their certificate was important to them relative to the learning they were getting out of the course. So I'm sure the number that got some substantial learning out of the course was somewhat higher, but at least as a baseline, as a benchmark, that's the number that we had. Let's break that down a little bit more and look at it from some different perspectives. If you look at watching the videos, i.e. students who got the learning material out of the course, from the number that started, which as I'll show you was below the 81,000 that signed up for the class, somewhere north of 20% were still watching the videos at the time of the final exam. These are numbers of students who were watching the videos at the time of each of the various assessments. So you see a curve that goes down, but not nearly as sharply as the curve that starts with the registrations and goes to the certificates, shows that students were still engaged in participating and watching the videos all the way through. This next graph breaks it down even more specifically. So if you start with the number of students who signed up, this is the number I gave you here, only 61% watched any of the videos. And again, that number is higher than most of the comparable classes. In most other classes I've heard about, it's 50% or less, but that suggests that 40% of the people who clicked the button saying, yes, I want to take this class, for any number of reasons, didn't actually start taking the class. And then from there, it goes down to the point where about 13% of the people who signed up for the class took the final exam. Now you'll see that that's actually slightly higher than the 11% who finished the third and final peer-assessed written assignment. Lots of different reasons why that might be possible. That third assignment was by far the most substantial work assignment in the class. It's the one that required you to actually develop your own idea for gamifying in a real-world situation and write it up in a fairly substantial way. So many students may have just done the final because they wanted a sense of closure. It's possible, based on the way the points were structured, that you could get the certificate doing the final and not doing that last peer assessment. Or students may just not have had time to do the peer assessment and didn't care about getting the certificate but wanted to take the final. Lots of reasons why we saw that, but good to see that the numbers stayed that way all the way through. And when you break it down, it looks, from my perspective, even better. So if you start with the number of students who watched at least one video, 21% took the final exam. So 1 in 5 of students who started the class, who did anything at all to engage with the class, got all the way through after 6 weeks and took the final exam. If you take the number of students who submitted anything, the students who did the first 5-question multiple choice homework assignment, if you start at that point over here, 40% of them took the final. So of students who were willing to engage and participate actively by submitting work, nearly half of them were there at the end of 6 weeks. And starting with the students who did the first peer-assessed written assignment, 80% took the final. 70% did the last peer assessment, 84% did the second one, but a substantial majority of people who were willing to do a peer assessment stuck with it all the way through. And that was very encouraging to see. The anecdotal reports from other Coursera courses is that when peer assessments are introduced, the engagement numbers drop very substantially. Peer-assessed written work is just harder. The assignments tend to be more challenging. The peer assessment process is something that students may be worried about. It's problematic, it's logistically complicated, it imposes a burden on students to grade each other's work. So that's understandable why that happens. And as I said, there are substantial limitations in peer assessment generally and in the particular Coursera implementation at this time. But I was glad to see that so many students stuck with it, and that the introduction of the peer assessments in the course, which I felt, again, was important to the learning, didn't have that very tremendous chilling effect on students' involvement in the course. So those are the numbers. The one other chart I'll show you is the distribution of scores of students who completed some of the work. So the left side of the chart here, the students who scored below, say, 50 points on the course, most of that I think we can disregard, because most of that are students who completed a few of the assignments. Either they started off and then they didn't have the time, they lost interest, they had some technical glitches, they concluded they weren't going to be able to get the certificate, so they didn't all the way through the course. Whether or not they continued watching the videos and following the course, they probably weren't students who were trying to earn the certificate seriously throughout the entire course. So the curve of those students is really this curve you see here, which, not surprisingly, looks like a standard kind of bell curve distribution skewed to the right. And this looks a lot like the grade distributions of the courses I teach in person at the University of Pennsylvania, where the modal grade is typically a B+ or an A- on our scale. make what you want of that in terms of grade inflation. I wouldn't draw a direct analogy to this course, but it's a familiar kind of pattern. And you can see here the numbers of students who got each block of scores up to 95 to 100%. Again, 8,280 students got the certificate of accomplishment, and that's roughly, I believe, 80% of the students who took the final exam. So some of the students took the final exam again and didn't have enough points because they didn't get credit for other assignments. But that suggests that most of the people who were willing to do the assignments all the way through got a passing grade. And that was my intent. I didn't structure this class to be so difficult that students who tried hard probably wouldn't succeed. My intent was to make it challenging enough that it was a real course, but easy enough that if you stuck with it, watch the videos, study diligently, you should be able to get a passing grade if you completed all the assignments. And that, I think, is what these numbers reflect. Now, it's important to keep in mind when looking at those numbers that if what I wanted to do was have the highest possible percentage of students quote-unquote pass the class by getting the certificate, I would have designed the course very differently. I would have had many fewer assessments, easier assessments, and would have structured the class entirely around answering those questions right on a very small number of multiple choice quizzes. That wasn't the goal. The goal was learning, and all the assessments were a means to that end. But again, whenever you hear someone judging the success or failure of these kinds of classes based on the certificate, keep in mind that if you want high completion numbers, then you can design the class that way. If you want to design the class to focus on learning, then naturally that's going to lead to some students who either don't reach the required threshold or drop out because it's too challenging or takes too much time, or again decide to participate in other ways. Second point is that we had, as I said, an extraordinary range of students all over the world, different levels of experience and so forth, and so I tried very hard to design the class in a way that would be accessible to as many students as possible, but that was never going to be perfect. The third thing that I did to highlight in terms of the instructional design was to think very hard about how we could make assessments, the assignments in the class, into learning experiences in their own right. And my TA, James Arrington, gets a lot of credit for helping with this as well. We, for example, had a whole number of questions in the multiple choice homework assignments that required you to go out and play a game or read about a particular game and process it. Think about that real world example and bring it back into the question, as opposed to just focusing on listen to the lecture, regurgitate the facts on the quiz. The peer assessments were even more designed to facilitate learning. They forced you, hopefully, to think and go out and understand how to apply the concepts in the class, and then the process of evaluating your own work and then assessing others' work was also designed to make that assignment or assessment process into a learning experience in its own right. The final point to highlight is that when I said early on that the course wasn't gamified, I lied. I lied in one way that I explained, which was that I included a secret message game in the bookshelves behind me, which was a deliberate attempt to make the course a little bit more fun and engaging, at least for some of you. But also behind the scenes, I designed this course using the advice I gave you, which is to think like a game designer. And so the structure of the course was designed based on the notion of how do I get students engaged, get you on board, get you up to speed, and then keep you engaged through the series of challenges that the course presents. And the structure of the content and assessments looked a little bit like this. The curve of progression, the player's journey that I gave you as one of the design concepts in the course. So we started off with some onboarding, with some initial general material a week before any assignments were due, and then a steady process starting with one 5-question multiple choice quiz, to 10-question quiz, to difficulty ramping up with the peer assessments, and going up until you got to the boss fight, the third peer assessment, which was substantially more challenging than everything else, and was introduced in the third or fourth week of the class, because then you had 2 weeks to do it and a week to grade it, so that there was room for the final and then a kind of rest a little bit at the end of the class. It's the structure of progression and increasing difficulty we see in games, and would keep going like this again if we had more time and a longer class. So these ideas that I talked about can be used in many contexts, even where the output is not something that you might say is clearly something gamified. This class could have been gamified in lots of other much more express ways, but it used some of the techniques that I talked about to make it more engaging, and I think that contributed to the levels of engagement that we saw. So, what comes next? As I mentioned, I have a book coming out with my colleague Dan Hunter called For the Win. The course was not an excuse to sell a book. The course is free. The course is over. I gave away all of the information and my time in it because I wanted you to have the opportunity to learn. If you do want to get more information, I hope you will take a look at the book. If you find the course valuable and you find the book valuable, I hope you'll spread the word, tell people, post about social media. That's important in terms of spreading these ideas because frankly, part of what I'm trying to do, a big part of what I'm trying to do in the book as well as in the course, is to promote the idea of gamification and promote better understanding about just what this field is. So in that light, there I expect will be future sessions of this course. I expect that it will be offered again sometime in 2013. There are already a few thousand students who've signed up. If you know people who are interested, they can go to the course page and sign up for the next session of the course. Exactly when it is gets decided by my university, so I don't know yet, but given the level of interest in the course this time around, I'm pretty confident we'll see it run again. I'm not planning at this point a follow-on or advanced course or a Coursera course on something else. This one took, again, pretty much my entire summer to put together. Right now I'm teaching my classes, I've got the book coming out, I've got other research projects, and quite frankly, this course was designed to give you what you need to know to understand gamification, have a good foundation of knowledge so that you can take the next step, so that you can go out, as I said, and go forth and gamify, apply this knowledge in your own life and in your own business context. You shouldn't need another class, another broad-based class like this one in order to do that. The best experience and learning you can get with this foundation is the experience and learning that you get in the real world. If you're interested in more information, though, I'd point you to the book. I'd also point you to gamifyforthewin.com, which is a website that my colleague Dan Hunter and I oversee that's got a blog and information about gamification. We'll be posting there as the book release process goes on. And the final thing that I would say to you is you've now all got some expertise about this subject matter. There are not that many people out there in the world who have spent the time on gamification that you have by participating in this course. And so I hope that you will share with me and with everyone else what you're doing. Blog about it if you have a blog, post on social media, use my Twitter handle at KWerb when you post things on Twitter so that I see them. I'd love to hear about what all of you do with what you've learned in this course or from other sources that have helped to teach you about gamification to spread understanding of this field. Because, again, as I've stressed, for me, this course was a grand experiment. I know it was for you. And I'm truly honored that you participated and spent your valuable time on it. And I hope you took away something that's productive and useful to you as you go forward in your life. Thanks.